Thanks for attending, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Don. I'm Chairman and CEO of ALX Resources. Our slogan is the power of exploration, because that's where the world is going. And this presentation is called Exploration for an Electric Future. Okay, I'm pressing right in the middle, Dave. There. Forward-looking statements. This is long and complex. I will be making forward-looking statements, and you can look this up on our website for any greater detail. So who we are. ALX is the result of a business combination of Lakeland Resources and Alpha Exploration. I've heard a lot today about the production of metals and the mining of metals and batteries and all these things, and that's why we're aiming where we are. But what I do know is that in order to mine something, you have to find it, and that's what we do. So we're a spin-out, predecessor was a spin-out from the takeover of Alpha Minerals by Fission Uranium in 2013. Then we merged. We were exclusively uranium at that time, but as the uranium market waned in, say, 2018, 2019, that's when we decided to look at other metals in Saskatchewan where we were comfortable. And that included, first, nickel. There's also copper deposits, and lithium is now in our portfolio as well. So who we are, again, not a lot of time to go through all the great people in our company. We have presidents of companies, people that have been involved, ex-presidents, I should say, people that have been involved in uranium for many years with a great deal of knowledge. On our board, a former director of the World Nuclear Association, Monsieur Jean-Jacques Gautreaux. So he's a great guy to have when it comes to the fuel cycle of uranium. Howard Hogan, a businessman, Mr. Pat Graining, who's here today, sorry about that, our CFO. Again, a lot of experience, technical experience. Charles Roy, who was with Cameco, Seared Erics, worked for decades in uranium. Dave Quirt, same, just retired from Orano. Ken Wozniak, who I credit with helping the discovery at Patterson Lake by making a recommendation of where to drill. And Larry Halbert, who is a nickel expert, former GSC in Canada. So here's our resources, ALX Resources projects. As you can see, there's a big cluster of them in Saskatchewan, because that's where we started. We have, in the north, we have nickel, we have uranium. We have uranium on the Hook Carter project on the southwestern part of the Athabasca Basin. We have some gold projects as well. Some things in Ontario that are under option. Electra Nickel, which we drilled this year. But in the last little while, we decided to not just wave at the lithium train as it went by. And so we staked some properties in the James Bay region of Quebec. We can see Hydra Lithium, a little black star, and also Anchor Lithium. So if this is the future, we want to be a part of it. We've seen a lot of graphs today already. This is the fossil fuels use forecast that's currently on the Government of Canada's website. So in the next 30 years, they expect it to be down over 60%. Meanwhile, the electricity demand is going to rise in that same time frame at least 50% or so. So there is a new critical minerals list. I've highlighted the ones that we are most interested in. In the lithium space, that's lithium, cesium, tantalum, LCT, pegmatites, and also nickel, copper, and cobalt run together as well, and of course uranium, which was our first love. Another lithium chart, we've seen quite a few today. This is just typical of what the demand is expected to be. And this one is in, well, it's a 15-year time span. You can see in 2015, I became involved in a lithium company, and it was a bit of a hard sell at the time. A lot of people thought, just like uranium a couple of decades ago, what are you doing that for? But look at it now. So here's a couple of things about lithium. These are the three types of deposits. There's hard rock, there's brine deposits, and there's clay deposits. In Canada, we do not have brine deposits except the extraction of lithium from oil and gas wastewater. We don't appear to have clay deposits, but we do have hard rock deposits. This is North America's only operating lithium mine, but I'm now reminded there is a mine called Tanco in Winnipeg or Manitoba because of the Canadian government's recent ruling about Chinese investment. It was a tantalum mine, always was, but it's also producing lithium. So this is at Hydra. Our first prospecting occurred in the latter part of October. This is our crew standing on a pegmatite. We don't know the chemistry of these yet, and we have samples in the lab, which we expect next month. And the 4 projects at Hydra are in a pretty hot district, and Patriot Battery Metals has done very well. That's the red star there. The 4 projects, Volta, Sprite, Echo, and Nike, they're all north of the known deposits, which are James Bay, Rose, and Whabouchi. And the reason that we're there, it's because it's not that remote, because you have roads going all the way to the north, all the way to these areas because of these hydroelectric power stations. And when something is created for you, just follow that road, because you can drive right there and then use helicopters over short distances. A little bit about the deposits. Basically, for a lithium hard rock deposit in Canada, you need more than 26 million tons and probably more than 1% lithium oxide. We selected these areas, an example of how, and that's these were lithium lake sediments, lithium in lake sediments that we had a consultant look for. Where was the enrichment? What was leaking out of certain places? So this is the Echo, and that's how we chose the areas that we chose. And here's Nike. There's not that much information on lithium in these areas because nobody looked for it before, except further to the south. And in Nova Scotia, not just a postcard. There's lithium in Nova Scotia. And in the southern half of the province, there is a deposit called Brazil Lake. I believe the next speaker is from Brunswick. No, they're in the next room. That's right. I'm in a hybrid here. We're uranium and lithium. So this is a smaller deposit, but it's high grade. We did the same thing again. Some notes on that particular deposit. It's only 500,000 tons, but it's 1.3% lithium, and it's open at both ends. Here's an example of what they're finding. They're stripping this particular pegmatite in the southern area of the deposit. That was from their 43-101. Again, we used lake sediment anomalies. The 2 projects are Yankee and Drake. A little bit about Saskatchewan, or more than a little. We've been there for a long time. Uranium is produced over 900 million pounds in the province since 1975. Gold, base metals. It's a very rich province and often only thought of as a place to grow wheat and other things like that. So in the northern part of the province, we have the Athabasca Basin. We have a number of uranium projects there. Sabre, Gibbons Creek, Black Lake, which is a joint venture with now Uranium Energy Corporation and with Orano. Hook Carter, which is 80% owned by Denison, 20% by us. Carpenter Lake is 60% us and 40% packed in gold, which used to be called Noka. And Javelin and Mackenzie Lake in the southern part, just off basin, are 100% owned by us. Also a couple of nickel projects in the north and gold projects. So the Athabasca Basin, all the deposits are on the edges. If you didn't know that, the reason they are is because it's really deep in the middle and it's almost suicidal to go in there and drill. You wouldn't have much money left after a certain period of time. That hole today, if you drilled it, probably would cost over $1 million, 1,455 meters to the unconformity, and then you're still not finished because you have to go into the hard rock underneath. The models have changed. This was a near miss at Midwest because people were looking for uranium in the sandstone, so they missed the deposit that was sitting there. This is the model that resulted from that miss and the new realization of what was truly happening. Then, after Millennium was found around 2000, hence the name, it was realized that these deposits can also exist deep into the basement. So old drill holes are abundant that could have hit something if they'd just gone further. So Sabre is in the northern Athabasca Basin, where we have, I don't have a pointer, but that's near Stony Rapids, Saskatchewan. There's uranium in the vicinity. 5 kilometers away, there's a red triangle. That's the Fond du Lac uranium deposit, which is small, 1 million pounds, but it's there. It shows there's uranium in that area, in the system. So up close, we found something called the Jigsaw Zone, that spur heading to the south of the property. And there's all kinds of structure going through, radioactive boulders. So how do we find this zone? This is what we got in the government archives. Another picture. We managed to find it and sample it this year. This was a silicified rock, and that's called a jigsaw breccia, hence the name of the zone. And to the south of the Jigsaw Zone, we found uraniferous, what we believe to be uraniferous because they were in 1979, they probably still are. They're radioactive and they're in the lab right now. And there's a picture of one of the rocks that we took out of the West Pit, and there's the sampling that just occurred just a few weeks ago. This is the model that could have produced that, whereas uranium is potentially hundreds of meters down, and a hydrothermal cell brings uranium and phosphate and rare earths to surface, which could be the expression that we're seeing. So next steps at Sabre, there's major faults. We have to get geophysics to find where there are conductive bodies along these faults. The surface expression is there, and it's a matter of finding conductors and drilling them, and using potentially a system like this one that can penetrate very deep by putting receptors on the ground and flying the helicopter over the area that you're, say, 1 kilometer squares. And we know that that can see down to 800 meters, not that we want to drill that deep, but it'll see a lot. Hook Carter, there's Patterson Lake, there's Arrow on its own there in the Patterson Lake corridor. We've got Spitfire, Pure Point uranium, and that zone is running right into the ALX Denison property. Denison drilled it, they hit structure, they didn't find a deposit, but they plan a deep penetrating survey like the one I just showed next year. So this is where it gets interesting and what we do, the case of the upside down map. So in the north, we were just looking at Sabre, which is a little further west, the Flying V property. Flying V, we staked because of cobalt metals. I call them the Billionaires Club. They came into the area in 2019 where you see the pink claims. They staked all of that. They just recently let some of it go because they flew it, and what they kept actually borders our Flying V property. So that tells me, which we suspected, that maybe the area they first staked was not that prospective. And yesterday it came open for staking and nobody staked it, that orange part. So Flying V, there's showings there. The Nickel Lake showings, for years we thought it was just one, and I'm going to show you why. So in 2008, a hole was drilled, NL08-01, and that was one of the showings at Nickel Lake. And this is what it looks like. Almost a meter of 1.89% nickel, 0.96% copper, and it's 0.11% cobalt. Some gremlins got in there. That was an interesting hole for them. 2008, the world ended. Nobody went back. We staked it in 2018, and there was no competition. So we flew it this year. Where you see the warm colors, that's where there's conductive zones, and the black lines show where the conductors run through these conductive zones. So there's a number of areas on the property. Those pink blobs are the best ones. We went there in September using a helicopter to go along those surface traces. Here's one example of the 1D conductor where there were sulfides that were found. These were not mineralized enough in nickel for our liking, but this one was. Historical trench, conductor 6D. So I'm trying to figure out, how did this 1% nickel sample, why didn't anybody ever go back there? There's no sign of anyone sampling there. And the reason is, well, here's the map from the 1964 drilling. Take a good look at that. That's the area of the north arrow on the map. There's a little chart up top that shows some of the values. 0.89% nickel, 0.32% copper over 2.5 feet. Again, not a huge intersection, but there's fertility there. So then when we looked at the north arrow very carefully, we could see that the arrow was upside down. So the whole map had been lettered upside down. So we got the claims map from the government. There's the real Nickel Lake in yellow. There's the claims from 1964. And when we could see the claim numbers on the original map and then turn it around 180 degrees, then it suddenly made sense. So there's that map, now geo-registered, rubber sheeted, we call it, on top of the modern lake layout. Now we see how everything works. There's our samples, the red triangles. There's the holes, 1964 holes that nobody ever followed up on. And there's our conductors that we just found. And why did no one see a conductor before? Because it was flown by another company. They misnamed Nickel Lake. That's not Nickel Lake. The real Nickel Lake is further east. The area they thought was the 1964 drilling, it's not the 1964 drilling. It's actually to the east. So they flew with Megatem 2007, and they found an anomaly at where they thought was Nickel Lake. They did not detect an anomaly in the 1964 work area, so they ignored it. Why would you go there and do anything? But the real Nickel Lake sat there. So it's been 58 years since that drilling was done and those trenches were dug. So they followed up with a VTEM survey. I know I'm going a little over time. These anomalies were found. The real Nickel Lake sat undisturbed. So we flew it, and we found a conductive plate. Each one of those lines is 150 meters apart. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 750 meters. Is about 700 meters of strike length. There's the drill holes. This is a bird's eye view. Let's look at the cross section. You can see where all of these holes missed the conductive plate because they did not know it was there. It was totally unknown to those explorers. So we have now, these are recommendations by Strongbow that that hole was so good, there should be more, and sulfide system. Here's our new map. We have over 1,000 meters of a conductive body that begs to be drilled. And that's what we plan to do, whether we find a partner to do it or do it ourselves. So you have a mag high with a conductor going through it, and you have historical work that was like a cold case. Firebird nickel, this is under option to Rio Tinto. They can earn 80% if they spend $12 million. Same story, 3% nickel on surface out of one old trench, and drilling that found 2 meters of 0.9% that we did in 2020 before the deal. There's 20 targets that were identified from VTEM. 17 of them remain untested. We have a property in Ontario called Electra Nickel. We drilled it this year. We had some encouraging results, but not near 1%, but there could be more there to do, and we'll have that property for quite a while after we file the work. There's an example of some of the sulfide mineralization. That was mainly zinc in that particular hole, but it's encouraging to see that there's movement. And so our philosophy is use available historical evidence to guide what we do. We use artificial intelligence as well, carry out ground truthing of the AI and the surface trace of mag and EM anomalies, and then use all leading edge tools. And thank you for your attention.